Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that, plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. We had a special election last night. We've had we've had a few elections recently. We obviously had the ones in early November, the normal cycle, and those weren't federal elections. Gave us some, but they give you some sense of where the parties are. Last night we had a special election in Tennessee, and it was one of these ones. It's always hard to it's hard to predict with these things. You don't have a lot of polling. There's a general understanding that Democrats are really energized, probably going to outperform. This was a Trump 22 district measured against the 2024 election, and a very conservative district anyway. I believe the latest result, the Republican ended up winning. I think there was, that was the assumption, although, we're in a weird time. So there was definitely Democrats had some hopes. Republicans had a lot of fears. I believe the latest is that the Republican won by somewhere between 8 and 9 percentage points. That's like a 13-point shift from 2024, which is huge. So Democrats didn't win the race, but this adds another data point to the emerging understanding that Trump is super unpopular. Congressional Republicans are super unpopular, and when you have these races, Republicans do very badly. Again, it's hard for a party to lose a plus 22 district. I mean, you need to be not just like a tsunami, you need to be like a Krakatoa wave to have that big a shift when there's not some underlying demographic shift. Certainly you've had some parts of the country in the last decade that have moved a lot, but in most cases that's because, well, it used to be that Republicans did better with affluent, educated voters. That's changed. But this is more kind of like a tidal thing. So, Kate, we saw the results. What's your take on what that meant last night?
Yeah, I mean, also in the mix is like Ben, this woman who was running, like had some pretty kind of damning quotes in her arsenal. Like you're already kind of seeing the whole she was too progressive, she overperformed less because blah blah blah. But not even like in a progressive vein, even though she said that I'm very radical, which was probably not very helpful, but she also made comments like that she hates Nashville and she hates country music, which like
That's kind of rough. I hadn't even heard that.
like maybe keep that to yourself in that
I mean,
particular.
did the Republicans recruit her? I mean, that's like Nashville.
Yeah,
That's like, I don't know. Nashville is country music. I mean,
right.
obvious that's yeah. I saw this. I saw, we're already seeing as you said, some people saying, well, she was too progressive. You get a centrist person in there. They could have done it. I think November showed us that's not really how things are working these days. There are political contexts where that you've got to match the person to the district. But I think as we talked about after the November elections, you had something for everybody. Really progressive candidate, they won. Really centrist candidate, they won. They tended to win by the same margins. The other thing, though, is that as much as this was a huge overperformance, a huge swing, I don't think like I don't know, a little, little positioning stuff that is usually what, being centrist means these days in the context of these races. That's not going to overcome an 8-point delta. It's really hard to win a Republican 22 district. But again, 13, so there's, what we should also talk about. I was going to try to just set the caveat that you absolutely cannot just apply a swing in a special election to, oh, okay, it's a 13-point swing. That's what it's going to be next November. You can't do that special elections to a full national election. However, one thing that came out of last night is the turnout was pretty close to what it was in 2022, which was obviously a national election and a highly contested national election.
Yeah. Also, just on the kind of candidate side of things, the Republican was quite good. Like, it's a 39-year-old combat veteran of some sort. Also, Trump did like a teletown hall thing, which I just stick a pin in that.
I was
I
going to say
mean,
the same thing. There's a story there.
yeah, you don't want to do. I mean, God, who isn't fatigued of the whole like, oh, he walks slow today. He's probably, let's all diagnose him. He's going to die soon, whatever. But if there's one thing that Trump loves, it's these rallies. Like,
Yep.
that was
Yep.
all his juice at the beginning. Like, he liked traveling all over the place to wherever he could fill out, a big stadium, arena kind of thing. And now he's just doing them remote. That's a marked shift from what
Yeah.
we've seen from him before. And you imagine it's not because he sent Mike Johnson in his stead, that electric, cult of personality magnet. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that being said, though, the race got really nationalized. It got money, it got ads, like, it wasn't, I would say, it also wasn't really a pure special election, because it was just, since it was the only thing on the calendar like that, it really
Hmm.
got kind of nationalized
Yep.
in a way that
Yep.
makes me wonder if the swing would have been even more pronounced if Republicans didn't kind of roll up their sleeves to make the gap a lot smaller there at the end.
Yeah. I don't know if this is just that I've been busy with various things recently. Honestly, I only found out there was a race like a week ago. So it wasn't even, and again, I'm not, I'm my own person with my own weirdness. I've doing this, that, and the other, but I do think, I'm still fairly plugged into political news. So the fact that it did not come across, didn't force itself on my radar shows that at least uh, sort of mass Democrats. This was, we've seen races where kind of everybody who's, every Democrat who's spends a lot of time on social media knows about this race or that race. It wasn't quite like that, and I assume because again, it's a Trump 22 district. Like you uh, why pay attention, right? There's not many. There are a number of. I was going to say there's not many more Trump. There are, but still, that's a huge Republican district.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit struck, I think, by like the futility of what people are doing now. This ties into the, moderate versus progressive Democrats thing of, sifting through like, what did they run on? Affordability has got to be the name of the game, right? Like, that's all what the midterms are going to be. And it's just like, I just don't think it's that clear cut. And I feel like the one thing I've learned from working in politics for a while now is just, we have no idea what wins elections and what doesn't. You can just kind of come up with like educated guesses that have some data points behind them. And this one just kind of seems to me like Trump's approval is in the toilet. Like, it is right around where it was after January 6th. These are enormous lows. And you
Yeah,
can theorize why that is. Is it money? Is it what part of the economy, right? Is it the tariffs? Is it cost? Is it wage stagnation? Is it housing and transportation being expensive and childcare? Like, you can come up with all these different ideas. Are we still in a national COVID hangover? Like there's just so many different things that it could be that you have no idea because voters don't quite know themselves and aren't always incentivized to tell the truth. And I do think it's funny that it just always leads us to this place where like a ton of pundits are saying really confidently, this is the affordability platform. It's going to win for Democrats. It's going to win them the midterms. And I'm just kind of like, maybe, and I'm sure grumpiness about the economy is definitely going to help the party that's not controlling it. But I also would not be totally shocked if Trump just continues to be unpopular in the way he's pretty much always been unpopular. And you tack on to that the fact that he is, whether he wants to or not, a lame duck president. And that is going to come with some amount of deflation for his base. And that's a recipe for, a thermostatic swing. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's
Yeah.
that surface level and it's, all this kind of fiddling with around the policy edges is just kind of beside the point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things about the whole, progressive centrist thing. I mean, one part of it is how superficial it often is. When Ruben Gallego was thinking about, um, getting into that Senate race, and this is still when there was an incumbent Democrat, right? I mean, so it was that was a big move, right? That he would jump into what at the time seemed like it'd be a three-person race. And one of the big questions was is he too progressive? He's from a very he was from a very Democratic House district. He was known as being very progressive, kind of I mean that. And now suddenly when you hear about the sort of the moderates in the Senate, he's always one of them. And he achieved that um, basically by um, shifting shifting his stance, inoculating himself on the immigration issue, and I think, for lack of a better word, running on masculinity, for lack of a better word. He's a legit veteran. So those, but the point is that his politics are really he's basically the same guy, and so there's a heavy amount of this that is positioning and symbolism. Look, I'm definitely the type who thinks that you need, you this idea like, oh, it doesn't really matter, or oh, you when you look at the polls, not how people vote, people love the, capital P progressive agenda and all that kind of stuff. Um, that's you have to find people who match the district. But especially in this cycle, what we are seeing is that this is a Trump, no Trump binary question. And so unless you are, you know, unless you are really heavy in one direction and out of sync with the constituency you're running in, just the D after the name kind of locks in a certain point. And this is also, a reminder for Democrats, not necessarily that everything about Democrats become more popular, but it's a binary system. And on the point with Trump, I mean, yeah, this is we need to remember that Trump is not that far from his baseline over the last decade. He's never been popular, despite all the sort of the froth people were talking about, like in January and February. But we have this weird thing here that we've talked about before, where just before as usual, we started recording this episode of the podcast just after noon on Wednesday, December 3rd. Just before we started, he pardoned another member of Congress with a major public corruption indictment. A few days ago, he literally he literally pardoned a major drug running kingpin in the international drug trade. I mean, I mean, these things are so crazy. And we have this in the second Trump term. We are all kind of deeply in this nothing matters, right? Nothing matters. He does everything. Nothing matters. Well, it doesn't matter in the DC political news discourse, sort of. But what we're seeing is that it does matter. People and it's almost impossible to say which thing it is. Is it the illegal tariffs? Is it the pardons? Is it the all the ICE stuff? He's doing a lot of stuff that is really unpopular.
I think that's the important point because kind of tacked on to what I was saying about how Democrats have this ironclad conviction that it's all affordability now, and that's kind of the ticket to success. And the natural corollary to that is, so it's the Trump stuff on the economy that is what's making him so unpopular, right? Like tariffs and kind of pocketing gajillions in corrupt money while not really doing anything to help other people, that kind of thing. And it's just, again, I don't think it's that discreet. I think it's what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's like a heaping up effect of the tariffs and the corruption and spending all his time renovating the White House and, falling asleep in cabinet meetings and sending ICE to beat up immigrants all over the country and, putting National Guard into situations where they're getting killed. It's everything. And so this is like kind of unhelpful for people trying to run campaigns, but the atmosphere is just this kind of toxic miasma where
Mhm.
I don't think it's at all kind of follows common sense to pick one factor out from the whole kind of anti-Trump picture and be like, this is the Achilles heel.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that, good campaigns you mentioned, like, the ballroom, right? And I think it is still a an open q I think it's a complicated question, why the affordability issue seems to have so much salience now. Not because things are, not unaffordable and it's hard to make ends meet, but things were, you know, hard to make pretty hard to make make ends meet couple years before the pandemic. We had this during Biden's term where inflation had cooled dramatically, but if you looked at polls, people did, the population at large didn't think that. But to the extent that that is now the organizing issue, you mentioned before about the ballroom. This shows how people do not think in discrete buckets. Everything kind of comes together in a pastiche. It's a sort of a narrative with characters in it. And if affordability is the issue, if you've got the person who is kind of in our system, uh, realistically or not, responsible for everything. If things aren't affordable, the president should answer for it. And if he's spending his time designing what is it now? It's up to like 100,000 square foot ballroom or something like this. It's just this let them eat cake kind of thing. So even things that are not directly, even things that are not directly affordability can be woven together into an affordability thing because just at a basic level, uh, he appears to be spending a lot of very hands-on time on this ballroom project. And there are lots of reports that, what is it? They have to give him his national security briefings with sort of like, pictures and cartoons, but he's like deep in the blueprints of the ballroom, and now he's fighting with the architect that he hired because he wants to make it twice as big as he wanted to make it. So these kind of things are just such rich targets for this guy is out of touch. He doesn't give a fuck about you. He's building a ballroom. He's making, billions with his Saudi prince friends. It all kind of goes together. And the one thing I'm sort of surprised again, as long as affordability is the thing, this just shows that Democrats get caught up in this literalism too much. You have this whole debate about the Obamacare subsidies. Subsidies. He's raising the cost of healthcare for millions of people by like 200 or 300%. And again, Democrats are so literal that are like, "Oh, that's it's not inflation. That's the subsidies and the extra subsidies." No, it's just it's affordability. He's raising the price of a core good by like literally 2 or 300%.
Which I have to say, I am still shocked by. Like, all the reporting is, you know, there's no deal in sight, nothing's gonna happen on the subsidies, the price is just gonna go up. Like, what an incredible self-inflicted wound for Republicans that just clearly derives from hatred of Obama, which is almost kind of it feels like quaint to me. Like when Trump goes on the kind of Hussein stuff, you're almost like, "Ooh, throwback." Like you see like
Mhm.
Tina Fey on SNL or whatever. But
Right.
um that plus just, the classic like social safety net disdain kind of thing. But for a party that has become remarkably unideological, I am I would not have put money on those lingering grievances outweighing just shooting yourself in the foot right before a critical midterms election.
Yeah, I think there has to have been a few conversations that we had on the podcast before the shutdown where I figured Trump would say, "Yeah, cool. Like, let's do the subsidies for another year." Just then there's a question of, well, Democrats can't allow it to be 1 year. They have to make it permanent because yes, there was good reasons to think that why wouldn't Trump? It was a huge own goal to do this on this timeline in the first place. So I totally agree. And like I saw one of the articles that I think is one of the ones you're referring to, where the headline similar to what you described, where it says, Outlook looks, no deal on the horizon for subsidies. And it was presented as like, oh, Democrats fail again. So sad. And like it's pretty sad for the recipients, but like the, in cynical political terms, Democrats have to be thinking like, your funeral. I mean, like great. And especially, I mean, this is the what was most turned out to be most effective about the shutdown for Democrats is that we spent like 2 months basically where the main story was, can anybody convince Republicans to undo their huge Obamacare cuts? So like everybody knows now who did, even total non-news people know now who did this. And it's just it confounds me too. I really expected that they would have done that. And I cannot imagine the election political people in the White House. I mean, who am I joking? Everybody in this White House is a political person, but the people they've tasked with the midterm elections weren't thinking like, let's get to a deal. Like we need this more than they do.
I mean, I would have put money on a 1-year extension because it has all the hallmarks of how these deals always are, which is it's ends up being pretty bad for Democrats. Like it probably would be politically better for them to just be kind of accelerationist, but to, ungenerously squeamish, generously worried about people suffering to do that. So would have like made this deal and all of the kind of left would be pissed because it'd be like, well, you just saved them again. When are we ever going to let people kind of feel the effects of Republican extremism? And Trump wouldn't care because why would he ever care about Obamacare subsidies? Like he'll have like a lingering interest that it's an Obama thing. He'd want to call it Trump care or whatever, but like that's all, and it would be a flash in the pan and nobody in the country who doesn't work in news or, listen to this podcast would know about it. And that's that. Like how many times have we seen kind of identical situations to that? And and now it's just it also I think a little bit reflects how out of control like House Republicans are. We haven't really had a lot of examples of seeing that dysfunction lately because Mike Johnson just canceled the House altogether rather than like kind of try to deal with them. But again, you would just think that the carrot of, hey, we don't want to get our asses whooped and be in the minority would be enough for even the Freedom Caucus guys to be like, fine, I'll vote for it. And then I'll put out a statement about how I hate it so much, you know?
And you probably, you wouldn't have needed the Freedom Caucus because I'm sure they would have gotten a deal where they just make Democrats vote for it, and they'd get
Totally.
a sprinkling of Republicans, the ones who actually really, really wanted it, the frontline
Totally.
Republicans
Yeah.
who are, in trouble. Uh, Perversely, weirdly, luckily for them, Democrats got to have their cake and eat it too. They really tried to do this thing that was going to help millions of people, but would directly hurt them politically in 2026. So they did the right thing, even though right in an often very short-sighted way, and they still got the gravy.
Right.
They still get the good political option.
I kind of think like Trump has been, he said in a cabinet meeting yesterday, I think that affordability is made up. It's just a Democratic thing. And the fake news
A
media
hoax.
is
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
peddling it, which is just so hilarious because I'm almost like, you know what, call Joe Biden. You guys are going to have a lot to talk about on this subject, a lot of similar sentiments. But with that and his plan, I think his plan is just like he thinks if he sends around the checks, you know, his favorite gambit, like give everyone a small check with his name on it and the
Right.
memo line, right? That'll kind of fix everything. And it's like, well, we've kind of have a few data points of doing the whole giving people checks thing at this point. And remember when it was a huge hullabaloo that like Biden wouldn't put his name on them and it was all Democrats being hall monitors for no purpose kind of stuff. But
Right.
we've seen people like the checks, of course, but then it fades, right? Like a few $100s is not like the surgery that people who are really kind of hurting need to like make ends meet. So it's a nice band-aid, but then people are going to be like, okay, and where's my check this month? Or what next? You know, like a one-time $400 infusion is not life-changing.
What do we I I get conflicting signals on that. He talks about like a $2,000 check as the tariff dividend. Economists point out that the tariffs have not brought in anywhere remotely that much money. If you actually wanted to say that that's where the money came from. Having said that, I certainly Trump is the last person who would care to just say it's the tariffs, but just to put it on the credit card, just do it as debt, and who cares where it's from. And I hear that you're getting foot dragging on the idea from congressional Republicans, but like, do I really buy that they're going to say no? What do you hear? I mean, is that going to happen? What do you? I mean, and presumably they would do it, next September. Wouldn't make any sense to do it now. So what is your sense of that?
Yeah, that's more or less my impression too. And it has a little bit of an element of like, as you say, a kick the can down the road thing. You don't really need to deal with it right now. So you can kind of just be like, yeah, for sure, the checks. And like, yeah, but I mean, in terms of like the obstacle to doing it, I mean,
Hmm.
it seems to me like you have national debt concern, which is like not a thing when there's a Republican president. So I think
Right.
everyone will find their way over that. But yeah, I don't know. Nothing's clear right now. It just like he's doing his thing where he's, you know, doing test balloons, bringing it up. Like he's
Right.
still in his like hissy fit about affordability not being real. So if he like comes back around on that, maybe we'll see.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I guess just thinking of the politics of this, I guess that if, and this is another huge wild card, if the Supreme Court comes back and says the tariffs are illegal, that's going to throw some level of wrench into the works. I guess I don't. Um, I think those things do matter, especially when they, when it's branded as much as Trump brands them. But I don't think I don't think it's the kind of thing where you're in this kind of political environment and people get a check for a few $100s, even people for whom a few $100s is a lot of money, and they think, "Wow, okay, I'm totally for Trump now." That's I don't buy that. I don't think that's how anything works. But
I mean, he tried it before, right? Like, if it was going to work, he probably would have won his second term
yeah, yeah, yeah,
after the
no,
first, so
totally, totally. It's one of these things where it counts, but it is a sort of a thing on the margins that certainly if you're going to do fiscal stimulus, you want to kind of send them with not just signed, you do it like, where the check is a picture of, if I were doing it, I send out a check and the check is a picture of Josh and it's just like a few lines on it that says the money. So you do the sort of the heavy branding, and I guess that was too much for Dems.
yeah. Okay, so there's one story that we kind of missed when it happened because we were doing other things, but there's a new news hook, and I have been wanting to talk about it. And it's the situation where Chuy Garcia, an outgoing rep in a very safe blue seat, basically didn't tell anyone that he's retiring until after the candidate filing deadline, which was done in such a way that his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, who's not related to him, could file her papers at the very last second. Window closes, nobody else has time to get in for a primary. So basically, he gifted her this
The
seat.
seat, right?
And I thought at the time it was so absurd and should be just roundly condemned. Like, you don't own that seat. You don't get to pick a hand chosen successor and ensure that she doesn't have to fend off a primary like, obviously, it's not like a fiefdom that you get to give to your next person. This was clearly so shitty. And he was
Hmm.
like, oh, it was a last minute decision. It's like, oh, was it a last minute decision so that she got her papers in at 11:59 p.m. or whatever?
Right, right.
But the reaction to it was so ridiculous on the left. Like, you
Yeah.
had something like 29 Democrats give floor speeches, like adulating this guy. And a lot of it came from, I think, the progressive corner because he had been a
He's
solid
part of that
progressive
faction, yeah.
legislator. And then Marie Gluesenkamp Perez wanted to do or called for, a
Censure or
censure. I was
rebuke
going to say
or something.
condemnation. Yeah. One
Yeah.
of those that doesn't actually mean anything that they all do to each other now, but she gave kind of a speech and brought up this motion to like slap him on the wrist or whatever. And the reaction to that was also ridiculous. Or you
No,
had
she was treated like a traitor.
yeah, you had
Yeah, yeah,
Democrats and
yeah.
like kind of lefty pundits alike being like, this isn't the time for this. How are we supposed to be the kind of pro democracy party if we're focusing on our own and not on Trump? And like, what about them? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just, I found the whole thing baffling. I was like, what he did was corrupt and shitty, and you should call it out. And how in the world are you going to have any authority as the kind of pro democracy party if you have no trouble with like giving away a seat in the House of Representatives as an inheritance to someone else? Like, that's insane. Like, I'm totally agnostic on the rebuke censure thing. Like, all that stuff is so stupid, and so many people have been censured by now that if it ever had any kind of bite, that's long gone and
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, the House isn't really doing anything anyway, so whatever here or there. But he should have been condemned, and she should have not been alone in that. It should have been a uniform. Like, even if you liked him when he was in office, be like, okay, but that was shitty. That's not how we do that. She has to run in an election and win the seat on her own merit. And I'm just like shocked that there was not uniformity around that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one sort of wrinkle to this was that people on the centrist side of the party were, because obviously the Bernie wing of the party has been very big on, oh, it was fixed for Hillary, and they're the primary schedule and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of people, people who were very invested in the sort of the centrist progressive thing. The centrist people were like, oh, what about fixing? And because this is fixing. I mean, literally. I mean, you have those two conjoined aspects of the filing deadline and the safe Democratic district. I don't know. I mean, the funny thing is that generally speaking, um, you can a retiring member of the House can do this legit, right? Because whoever they're generally speaking, whoever they, I mean, often it's their kid who's being anointed. Sometimes it's their favorite staffer, but generally speaking, that person can, you're in the House, you've got the Democrat in a safe Democratic district, you've got all the sort of the constituencies you've got good relationships with. You call them up and say, hey, I love Kate, my chief of staff, and she's running, and I hope you can support her. You get your donors to so you can kind of do it without this thing of like, I mean, I don't know if it was like literally, was she in there the day of the deadline? Because I guess the key is that you would need to come in with some signatures. So it's not even like you find out 2 days ahead of time,
Right.
and you
But you can't
can,
file early enough that word gets out, right? That
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
people's
exactly.
antennae go up.
Exactly. But even there, like, I don't, what is it? Well, do you, regardless, this is it's kind of like, and to me, it's not even sort of like, oh, how are we going to be the party of democracy? Just like that's, I'm not going to, I'm not going to spend a lot of time being upset about it, but it's absolutely the kind of thing you should just be able to say you shouldn't do that. That's
Yeah.
crappy. Your constituents, you know, House constituencies are upwards of 800,000 people. They deserve. It's one thing when you have, just inherently heavily blue and heavily red districts don't really have a lot of choice. They have to keep electing their incumbent basically because it's so hard to primary someone. So yeah, that's just not right. People, you should have fair elections. It's just crappy. I don't know. I'm curious how, um, uh, I don't think this is the first time this has ever happened. Um, it, and I don't know. Well, it's simple. You shouldn't do this. And there should
Yeah.
be, since it's not illegal and there's no way to kind of make that illegal, you can't, you can't make a law that you have to tell everybody in advance you're going to retire. The only way to disincentivize it is to have some real condemnation,
Yeah.
and so everybody should condemn it.
It's just such a perfect episode of like Congress brain, which is a combination of kind of feeling more special than everybody else, but also having the complicated thing of like it's your friend or at least your colleague that
Hmm.
you're whatever. And like I get that like on a human level that's kind of uncomfortable, but like
Yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah.
things about being a politician that are uncomfortable on a human level that you're willing to accept in order to get to wield more power than the rest of us. And it's one of those things where there should be no triangulation. There should be no kind of like easy, hedged statements about it. Like, just be a normal person and be able to say, like, yeah, no, that sucks. That totally sucks. And the fact that like so many of them were unable to do that is just, God. It's like you just need more normal people in there.
Now you're saying that now a Democrat has filed as an independent, so
Right.
there's at least some. So what's the story there? Is it someone who would have uh some theoretical juice to actually make a go of it, or is it more just a kind of a symbolic thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she is an activist who most recently worked at a kind of Latino centric place during the Biden administration. So, and it's, a very Latino district. So, could be helpful, but at the very least, good. Someone should run. she should have a primary challenge now, and this should be made more difficult. So, hat tip to, I guess her name is Mayra Macias, who's running. Hat tip to her. Don't do this kind of shit. As you say, it is just so funny that they did it in this really like blatant, shitty way, because it is so easy to like basically rig it in a totally allowed way where you're just like, here are all the contacts and connections that you
Yeah.
need to run a race, which no normal person has or knows how to do. Best of luck,
Yeah,
Just
here are my
so
donors.
stupid. Yeah.
Here's I'm endorsing you. That is that just is what it is. There's nothing wrong with there's certainly nothing illegal or unethical about someone endorsing someone else. There's no trick.
Okay, so to end with a little bit of froth, a little bit of dessert,
Yeah.
some number of our listeners, I'm sure, have been following the newest chapters of the Olivia Nuzzi scandal. I, for one, have been absolutely transfixed, and I want to be very candid that I am not couching my interest in like, you know, kind of sputtering outrage about the genuinely enormous journalistic malpractice here. I just think it's really something to watch, her and Ryan Lizza, these like quote unquote star reporters who just have like the emotional maturity of 15-year-olds just kind of like going after each other. It's a sight to see. And then the RFK of it all, the okay, and so to catch everyone up with, in case you kind of checked out at the last episode, where things had ended is that the affair, in whatever form it took, came out.
Another put a pin in it. I still consider that part of this bizarre and not really credible, but let's move on.
And it adds to the teenagerness of it all to me. But anyway, so she had an affair with RFK. She had written a profile about him. She had profiled the others, kind of one of the haters' arguments. One of the biggest ones is that she wrote a really big piece about Biden's age type thing, which I actually think has been a little overhyped in this whole story because everybody saw how old he was and voters were already really bothered by it before this,
Yeah.
but whatever. So the affair comes out not by her own admission. Her hand was forced by another cameo, Kara Swisher. And her editors at New York Magazine found out. She was fired. She goes into kind of a self-imposed exile in Malibu for a year.
I never knew Kara Swisher had that role. That's the first time I'm
Yeah.
hearing about that. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
It's a sprawling cast. So
Yes.
she is there. Then we find out Vanity Fair is hiring her for like a made up position, this quote unquote West Coast editor job. And then you find out that meanwhile, she's been writing a book. And the kind of beginning of the unveiling of the new book was this just absurd New York Times style section profile, replete with like many little like Lana Del Rey-esque black and white videos of her driving a Mustang around Malibu with like hair floating in the breeze. And the author of the piece is like Nora Ephron, something related to her. And he is like obsessed with Olivia Nuzzi, as the profile says. Like, it's this thing where nobody can ever talk about her without being like, by the way, she's so hot, like drop dead gorgeous, which like, okay. But it's a total puff piece, she's just this like glamorous, like ingenue, typing her book into her phone while she hikes around and whatever. Okay, then we get the first excerpt of the book in Vanity Fair, and it is bad. The writing is bad and pretentious and someone called her Joan Midian. That was like a big joke at the time.
I hadn't heard that. I'm so
Yeah.
behind on this.
Using like the Palisades fire as this like tortured, protracted metaphor. And what people always talk about is the redeeming thing about her, right? Is that she writes, people are like, she's a wonderful writer. She's, so talented. And she writes these very like voicey kind of, what I think is her value is like her writing was fun. Like her pieces were fun to read. They weren't that serious, they were frothy, whatever. Okay. So excerpt comes out. Meanwhile, Ryan Lizza, who our listeners will
Well, can
remember.
I ask
Oh, go ahead.
you one thing here?
Yeah.
Because I heard about the excerpt. I don't think maybe I read one line of it. It's from my impression though, I have read her magazine work, as you said, not trying to be high end, but fun, punchy, a lot of whatever. People
Mhm.
thought she wrote profiles that people wanted to read. There's no question
Yeah.
about that. It sounds like there's some mix of she was getting help from her editors, and everybody gets help from their editors as the magazine whatever, but that possibly also she wanted this to be not just, oh, I had an affair by text with RFK Jr. and here's all the details. She wanted it to be, as you said, Joan Didion. She
Yeah.
wanted it to be something, and that she just added this kind of, it became pretentious and stupid. Whereas
Yeah.
before it was fun and people
Yeah.
liked that.
It has been a big kind of circulating joke around this, or people clamoring from like a deep dive from her editors at NY Mag to find out like where these discrepancies, like why was her writing fun before and now it's like totally tortured and like miserable to read. But I think it's more just she's trying to be literary now. Like
Yeah.
she's trying to just have it not be like a tawdry affair and more just some like the title of this puff piece was Olivia Nuzzi did it for love, right? So it's not an affair. She fell in love. It wasn't, it was out of her control. So,
And is it and it is still the operative story that not only was this affair not consummated, it was not even physical. It was purely
mhm.
emails and texts.
Another
I
part
don't
of
even
it
know
that
what
is
to say. I
just
mean, what?
another part
Like,
that's rough to read is like she's kind of acting like they had this really profound and like baffling attraction. And then whenever there's any kind of factual things, you're like, yeah, he was a dick to you. In the same way that like men are often dicks to women of all age, but like this story in particular, it sounds like the kind of guys you date when you're like 21. Like he'll be really, really nice to you one day and then he'll just stop talking to you the next. And it's like hurtful and baffling, but it's like she's a grown woman who's experiencing this as some kind of like really profound, like inexplicable thing. And it's just like, no, he sounds like kind of a bad guy who doesn't treat women very well, is like the long and the short of it.
and
So
that's
she's like,
not like that's like a shocker. I mean, this
exactly.
is
He has a
every
pretty well documented history here.
like everything, uh, even compared to some men who are deeply predatory. I would say RF. I mean, there are some former girlfriends of Trump who are like, oh, they're still like him and whatever. Everybody has dark experiences with RFK Jr. Like he really
Yeah.
seems to be a. Uh, I don't want to say something is worse than being a predator, but like a bad guy at a he's operating in badness on multiple fronts. Let's put it that way. He's not just playing
Totally.
in the consent territory.
And he's like totally skated on this because it's kind of like, what are you going to do? Like demand his resignation? Like, okay, like, and we already kind of know like one of his big stories is like potentially driving his ex-wife to suicide. So it's,
Yeah,
we are not kind of breaking new ground with him telling her he wants to impregnate her one day and then blocking her number the next. But it does bear saying that when all this came out, he like he was like basically good luck taking the fall. Like was nowhere for this, right?
and I just it just occurred to me a few days ago. It is still his operative story that this is all made up.
Yeah.
That none of this happened. Which again, it's sort of like that is sort of that's part of the Trump thing of nothing matters because what
Yeah.
who's gonna like insist he come clean,
Right.
it kind of nothing matters, but that part of it uh is there's so much weird
I
about
know.
it that I don't even
Okay.
know where to start.
So we've reached this point in the tale where it's still kind of very prurient, like did she commit journalistic malpractice? Yeah, but then she was fired for that, right? So like your critique can kind of be, Vanity Fair is being like shitty by hiring her in another journalistic enterprise. But up till this point, I would say the crimes are relatively low level still. Like, she was fired from the place she did the malpractice. Arguably, she shouldn't get another journalism job, but okay, fine. This is where we are. Now enter stage left Ryan Lizza, who was like a DC reporter guy. He had stints at all the places. He got fired from the New Yorker during Me Too for like unspecified allegations. Like, again, there are no heroes in this story. It is only villains. And he has started his own Substack, and to kind of counter the unfurling of her new book, he has started. The first one was in front of the paywall. All the rest have been behind the paywall. I have read them all without paying for it. Make of that what you will. But he is starting dropping these unbelievable essays about her behavior during this process. And let me add, not in a normal person way, because he has recordings of all of their arguments. He has like texts between her and RFK. The most recent thing he dropped was a memo that she wrote to advise RFK on his debate strategy. And so here's where things like take a turn. It's in his second installment where we go from kind of, well, I have to first mention in the first installment, it's called like How I Found Out. And the whole thing is building towards what you think is how he finds out about the affair with RFK. Not so. This is where he alleges that she had another affair with another presidential candidate she was covering, Mark Sanford, who is a Republican, kind of like fringe, not ever had like a big, momentum or anything, but he
Yeah.
ran in 2020. And apparently she did the same thing then, which we would note Ryan Lizza apparently knew of at the time, but, kind of stashed that away until it would benefit him at this later date. But in the second installment, you start getting into the kind of, when we're talking journalistic ethics, and it sounds a little like stuffy and like outdated, it goes beyond the pale in this one. Like, she was doing catch and kill operations of other stories that made RFK look bad. She was feeding him information from her sources, like on other campaigns. She wrote out this huge long memo about how he should kind of like deal with not being on the main card stage during the debates. I mean, she really just fully became a political operative for him, which also seems to correspond with the times that he's actually talking to her and doesn't have her number blocked, are like when she's feeding him information, which is like sad on a whole different level.
I was gonna say this part of it, as much as all three of these people are deeply unpopular for good reasons, this part of it is very sad.
It is sad.
That because no one deserves to be treated this way, but Olivia was a star reporter, had her, the world was her oyster, and she is committing these grievous journalistic uh, wrongs in uh, for someone who seems to be negging her and mistreating her, except for the days when he'll unblock her to get some to get some
Yeah.
information. I mean, like there's something kind of broken with. I mean, and lots of us have things broken with
Oh
us,
yeah.
but there's a lot of brokenness that led to this relationship happening, despite the fact that obviously it shouldn't have happened for all the obvious
Oh
reasons.
yeah. I mean, the psychology of it all is really sad. I have to say I started enjoying it a little bit less when I found out like both her parents died before she turned 30. Like, she had a hard upbringing. I mean, and you tie in the thing of like Keith Olbermann, who, by the way, fucking disgusting, dated her when he was like 57 and she was 18 or something, like totally gross. And then she has all these weird, really unhealthy seeming relationships with men who are like 20 or 30 years older. And like, those men should not be allowed to skate. That includes RFK. That includes Ryan Lizza, who
I
I
was going
think
to
has
say
proceeded
Ryan
into
is,
another relationship with a much, much, much younger woman,
yeah, no, it
allegedly.
yeah, well, allegedly I think he talked, I mean, I think he talked about the in any case, yeah, there is um, there's some issue with Olivia and older men. I mean, just that's pretty consistent. The whole the I think the magnetism. I mean, it is clear from what you've said, but just to sew it together, part of the magnetism of this story is that for people in the journalism world, for people in the political world, for people who are observers or either, no one likes any of these three people,
Hmm.
right? I mean, obviously everybody has people that, but in the public, as parasocial public people, there's no like Ryan fan section. There's no Olivia fan section or RFK. Everybody is like hate reading everybody's role in all of
Yeah.
this, and that just
Though
makes it weird.
totally. I would add though that one piece of this which like did kind of catch my interest at the beginning is how no, like, kind of quote unquote elite reporters who like ran in her circles will like talk about it. And maybe that'll change, but I saw someone I think from the Atlantic or something be like this is just sex shaming and it's like, well, no it's not. Like come on.
Yeah, I mean,
If you're
it's
going to self-immolate like this, you don't get to then be like can I have my privacy, you know?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, there's unquestionably part of this that you're hearing about her affairs, and there's an element of that, but she also was a top political reporter who had an affair with the person she was covering twice, apparently, then wrote a book about it. So I don't it certainly doesn't cut it to say this is just slut
Yeah.
shaming and it's terrible. I mean,
Tawdry. Yeah.
yeah, it's no, that
I mean, and so kind of where our story ends for now is I mean Liz is still whatever. I have to mention he ended one of his Substacks with a teaser that the Butler assassination attempt was faked. That is what like the kicker implied to get you to
wait,
read the next one.
are we still waiting for the next one?
No, the next one has come out. It nothing. He doesn't have anything. Like it's some kind of vague thing and Olivia might have a recording of something but it's gone now. It's like nothing.
Oh,
Nothing
I didn't
substantive.
even. Now let me ask, okay, cuz so I think one thing that has given, and tell me if I'm remembering this right, one thing that has added to Ryan's counterattack, for lack of a better word, is that when the affair first came out, when the RFK affair first came out about a year ago, give or take, I don't remember, but about a year ago, she accused Ryan of all of these things.
In
They
court?
ended up in court, and my recollection is that Ryan and his lawyers were basically able to come in with facts and receipts and make her back down. Um,
Yeah.
and so that kind of established that disputes of fact between Ryan and Olivia, Ryan has the upper hand because of what he
Well,
was able to do in court.
I'd like to add,
Yeah.
if he does have a factual record here, as he says he does, it's insane. Okay. Just
Well,
like
so
put that out there that it's really insane to have like recordings of your arguments with
well,
your
so
fiance.
all right. So this is the part I wanted to ask you about. It seems possible to me that uh, it's conceivable that in the legal wrangling, he might have gotten texts via discovery, right? So that's possible.
I don't know if it
Um,
ever got to that point though, because it
right,
was she was whatever. This really doesn't matter. We need to move on. But she was basically saying like he's harassing me, he's blackmailing me, which
right,
like
right,
implies that he already had some amount of whatever, the records.
right,
And
right, right.
he clearly already had this memo that at least he alleges that she writes. Of course, like this is a part of it that's like you can't trust anyone because A, they've all shown themselves to be huge liars, and B, he's publishing this stuff on his own Substack. So there's no kind of, talk about journalistic ethics. There's no editing or fact checking or guardrails. Like I'm pretty sure he's not reaching out to her for comment on stuff. So it's just kind of like this back and forth.
Well, I guess what I was going to say is that look, you could a married couple, a living together couple, one person could probably grab the other person's texts in a moment where they had the opportunity. But I was struck when you mentioned about the recording the arguments. You're running a recorder or you're not, right? And so that is, I don't even know. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Quite apart from any legality or anything, that is pretty. I didn't even know what to think. I don't know if they were already. I mean, I was going to say looking forward to a divorce. They're not married, so
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that wedding is long off by now. But oh my
yeah.
God.
Well, Liz Taylor and Richard Burton got together a second time, so you never can count anything out. But yeah, so have we exhausted the Ryan, Bobby, Olivia tale
That's right.
for this episode? I guess there could be
That's
more.
that's where things stand at the moment. So I mean, Vanity Fair, I guess, is like conducting a quote unquote review of, if they're gonna keep her in the role, which is to me is a little bit like, well, this is why you hired her. So it's a little bit silly to be
It's a
like,
little
I
unfair.
don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's
And
also for them. You're like, how could we have imagined that you would start an affair with a presidential candidate?
exactly.
How were we supposed to? How
See, again, everyone's a villain. Vanity Fair's a villain too. Everyone in this story is.
Well, the weird thing too is when they call her the West Coast editor. Vanity Fair is a publication about Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yes, they do great reporting on other things, but it is a Hollywood entertainment business thing. So what the fuck is a West Coast editor? Like, it's like your Hollywood editor of Vanity Fair. It's a Hollywood public. And again, that's not a criticism, but it's look at the things with the the pictorials of all the hottest and greatest actor. So even even the idea of a West Coast editor for Vanity Fair is absurd in itself on
That's
its
all
own
this
terms.
story is. It's
It's
just bad
absurdity all the way
behavior.
down.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right.
that was
So
fun. That was fun to get to
that
talk
was
about
fun.
because
That was
this
fun.
is the kind of thing that if you try to tell anyone who's not in the journalism world, they're like, what? Like, who? And you're like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to establish the backstory
Yeah,
of who's
exactly.
Olivia and what is the many the many layers of weirdness and glamour and awkwardness
And
that
self-destruction and
and
scandal.
self-destruction at so many levels.
Hmm.
That is the one part that kind of like I feel it's not guilt, but there's the self-destructiveness is so deep here that like you're like, oof, like
Yep. We're rubbernecking a train wreck here, but
yeah,
at
really,
least
really
we're
are.
honest about it. So
Yes, we're being transparent about what we're doing. Okay, I think we have come to the end of this week's
this
episode.
very hard news
Yes, this hard.
episode.
Well, we did the hard news in the first
Yeah.
2/3 of it or whatever. Thank you for joining us as usual, and I think that's all we have for this week. Yeah,
All right. See you next week.
later.
The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor-in-chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen.